Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. Out of all the genres of games, the MMORPG is pretty unique in the sense that out of the thousands of titles released, only a select few have ever taken off in a big way. Just think about it. FPS, RPG, survival, action, adventure, everything but the smallest of genres seem to have this really healthy and competitive ecosystem where you have many different titles representing the genre, whether that be AAA or indie. Whereas with the MMO, how many can you think of that really gained a sizable fan base that wasn't a flash in the pan? The genre is perhaps one of the most monopolistic in the sense, and slowly but surely, the community have really lost a lot of confidence in these MMOs, living up to the enormous amount of hype that they build up pre-release. Today, we have a video by the channel Jimmy, sort of theorizing why this is. This was recommended to me, so I figured we'd do another watch party here and see why he thinks why we might not get another good MMO.
I've been on this spree of trying basically every major MMO recently, and it got me thinking. And I might be the first one to ever have this thought, but I don't think we're getting another good MMO for a while. Other games that come out, they follow a very similar life cycle. A big mountain slope. You start out at the top, everyone's talking about the game, and it kind of just slopes down and loses its player base over time. I mean, it's a typical life cycle for a game, very natural. MMORPGs, on the other hand, follow a very different looking life cycle. They come in all shapes and sizes. They might start out with a bang, they might start out at the bottom and work their way up, but basically
Yeah, usually it's the first. Usually, most often, they have these insane launches with so much hype, but you know, there are cases where it's the opposite. As you can see, he shows Final Fantasy XIV here, and this is a very special case because the original release of 14 is far different from what it is today. It was so bad that the CEO of Square Enix actually formally apologized for how bad it was. And after that, they actually went on to remake the game, which is why 14, I guess along with early WoW, is sort of like the prime example for the inverse MMO launch where the player base actually grew as the game aged. It's a really good redemption arc and hopefully motivating for other developers out there whose games are in a rough spot. There is a way back. 14 proved that. You just have to, stick with it and follow up on promises and great design. But the more common scenario, in my opinion, is a new MMO is announced, and as more and more details get shared around, people slowly but surely get more and more excited. It's like a snowball that grows in size as it rolls downhill until it's this giant consuming boulder, and people are so excited for it, and they imagine it to be the answer to life itself almost, until inevitably they realize it's just another MMO. This huge hype comes crashing down along with the player count, and it flatlines and it maintains a relatively niche audience for years to come, either shutting down or just barely hanging on by a thread. It's a roller coaster for sure, very volatile. Hype can harm as much as it helps, I think. Obviously, the more eyeballs on your game, the better, but at a certain point, they're really set up for failure since it's just not feasible to live up to the standards that are set for them.
way you know if an MMO is good and it had any sort of success, long term, over the span of many years, it kind of looks like a real fucked up EKG. Like it's the game's pulse or something. Never healthy or stable, but it's there, which is what counts. It's been quite a while since we've seen a real banger of an MMO. It kind of feels like the MMO industry has always just been this game of king of the hill, and the ones at the top have ascended so high that there's really no catching up to them. It's really hard to imagine them being dethroned, and there's not going to be many that try. Because not only is developing a massive multiplayer online role-playing game one of the hardest things you can do as a video game developer, but it's also probably the dumbest thing you can do. We can't go into something like that until I tell you about something that someone's going to pay me to tell you about. So, 2023 was full of health issues for...
It honestly is a monumental task. I mean, there's a reason why we hardly see any indie MMO games. They just require so much money and time and planning, And the player base is definitely one of the harder to please. And it's such a huge risk because if you don't nail it, you really have so much to lose. I feel like MMOs are sort of caught in this trap where they require so much funding and time that really only AAA can pull it off right now. And I'm sorry, but if the last few years have taught me anything, is that AAA is on the decline. There are some good titles out there for sure, but these series which people used to cherish just seem to have become so disconnected, and a lot of the ones that do well are inspired by indie games. The Battle Royale genre, as far as I know, the first was H1Z1, made by Daybreak after they split off from SOE and became an indie game dev. But, the issue here is to fund such an expensive genre, you need to be AAA or endlessly crowdfund, which also has its own issues, as shown by Star Citizen, in my opinion, to a lesser extent Ashes.
Which led to a lot of involuntary weight loss. It wasn't fun. So this year I've made it a priority to make sure that I'm getting everything I need for both mental and physical health. And AG1 is helping me do just that. It's got 75 different vitamins and minerals that supports body, brain, and gut health. Very important things to keep healthy. And one thing I love about it combats visible signs of aging, which is incredibly important for me as Jagex continues to release quest after quest, making it impossible to end my series. AG1 can also help boost focus and mental clarity. And I've always struggled with sustaining energy throughout the day, and after a while of taking AG1, I noticed that I was not clawing and scratching for caffeine throughout the day. I just put water into the little bottle here. I do 8 ounces of water because it actually tastes good. I don't need to water it down at all. I shake it up a bunch, like get my cardio in for the day, and I drink it. It's a very easy process. As someone who's trying to be super mindful of nutrition and recovery, I highly recommend giving AG1 a try. You can try it for yourself by clicking the link in the description, and you can get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Big thank you to AG1 for sponsoring today's video.
Yeah, I'll stick with the Dew of the Mountain. Why get all old when you can die young and leave behind a bloated corpse that reeks of Doritos? That's what I say.
The thing that got me thinking about this the most came from a situation that's been kind of brewing up over the last 3 years. In June 2021, Riot Games put a post up on their website calling for any game developers that are wanting to enter the world of MMORPGs with them. And this was amazing news because it's pretty common knowledge at this point that Riot Games tends to not miss the things they've been making.
I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest reasons why people are excited for Riot's MMO is that it reminds them of a certain developer in 2004. Just think about it. Here we have a very popular game studio, which has a generally positive track record with an already established IP, releasing this IP as a new MMO with stylized cartoonish graphics. It's very reminiscent of the king of MMOs in its heyday. I am guardedly looking forward to it myself. I do plan on playing it if it ever comes out, but I do think that the similarities end there. I personally don't think that it will be the WoW 2.0 that a lot of people are thinking it'll be for a variety of reasons. Let's let Jimmy have the mic here, though, because I want to see what he has to say first.
Pretty good. Well, the MMO community was welcoming them with open arms. If you've kept up with the MMO world in the last 3-4 years, you know that the community is kind of still waiting for that game to come along that's just going to change everything. There was no real official news released for the next 2 years. The only set-in-stone thing we got was that Greg Street, who was the producer of the project, was leaving the company. Pretty soon after, he announced that he was launching his own company, making his own MMO. It was just very disappointing because he was extremely involved in the community and just had a lot of indicators that he really cared about this and was going to do his best to make it an actual game-changing, enjoyable MMO. Obviously hope for the best. But now about a year later, there's...
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty bad sign. In a genre as tricky as the MMO, it obviously definitely doesn't help to lose your director mid-development. I don't know the reason for it. I think you mentioned family issues. But if you want an example of a game that lost its director mid-development, take a look at Diablo 4, which obviously has had its own issues with direction. And that's not even an MMO, really. I mean, it was already years away, and I'm sure that this will set them back even more, as you can see evidenced by the co-founder himself here, Mark Merrill.
Whispers and rumors that this Riot MMO might not even be happening, which honestly would be the least surprising thing I've heard in the last 3 hours. At least. Riot Games has set a huge bar for themselves, which has raised everybody's expectations for everything they ever make. I can't tell you in confidence whether or not this game's happening or not. What I can tell you without a doubt is that it has been a bumpy ride behind the scenes. And if you'd like to see what Riot is most likely fearing, if you look up New World's player count history and see how that unfolded, you can see just how risky it is to release an MMO in the modern era of gaming. I've got around 760 hours played on New World and was a part of the...
That's definitely more than me. I did play New World on launch. I pretty much quit at the max level. My biggest problem was that the endgame siege mode required you to sign up and set time aside for a chance to participate, which was just terrible. And I feel like this is one of the bigger issues. There's nothing more annoying to signing up for this raid and then setting time aside only to find out that you didn't get picked. We're gamers, okay? We're already used to getting picked last for dodgeball. We've already been through getting ditched on dates. We don't need that happening to us in our video games too, okay? So that was a big sin here for New World. I mean, I enjoyed it for the amount of time I played. I felt like I got my money's worth for sure, but yeah, like most of the others, I was done as soon as I hit the max level due to that and many other issues, but that's a story for another time. Yeah, we'll make a New World video one day. Don't worry about that.
Community during the rise and fall of it. And I also saw how quickly that new and refreshing ideas can completely drain the life out of a player base if done incorrectly. New World's game design caught up with itself. Not really sure how long that game's gonna be up for. Probably some of the most fun I've had gaming during its peak. I really wish things were handled differently so that it wasn't in the condition it's in now. It was a good game with some crucial things wrong with it, ended up being the reason for its downfall. An MMO can only handle so many mistakes to the point where even a company that gets their funds from Amazon themselves can't really do anything for you anymore. So there's been some sprinkles of MMO here and there, a lot of underwhelming Kickstarter projects, some that are in a permanent early access phase, ones that scam hundreds of thousands of dollars somehow. But in the last
by the time Star Citizen releases, it won't be an MMO anymore. It'll be a simulation game. For those of us who will actually exchange fluids, it'll release once our great-grandchildren will be on space stations, living the life of a person living on space stations. It'll be awesome.
5 years, I think New World and Lost Ark are the only two MMOs that can claim they've had any kind of success. I've never played Lost Ark before. I tried looking up some stuff to get some more insight about it, but just like any MMO you try to get information on, it's players that have hundreds or thousands of hours just complaining about things, not giving any real insight to the casual experience of the game. What I can tell you...
I played Lost Ark as well. Much like New World, I quit shortly after reaching the max. I love the combat and gameplay, and even the PvP I put a lot of time into, but what killed it for me was the progression. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that I already get annoyed with MMOs with too many dailies and weeklies. At a certain point, I feel like they're chores, and I don't really feel rewarded for playing the game as much as I feel punished for not playing it. I think when you go too far with these timed activities, your players start to feel more like prisoners, and that was a big problem with BFA, actually, was just the astronomical amount of dailies and weeklies. My friends group actually referred to them as chores, and that's a problem. When a video game starts to feel like a chore, it's not really a video game anymore, is it? You're not playing it because it's fun, you're playing it because you're obligated to play it. I think one of the reasons why I like classic MMOs so much, it isn't necessarily for what they offer, it's what they don't offer. When I play vanilla WoW, I feel like I am much more in control of what I actually want to do when I log in, instead of, going through this laundry list of crap that I have to do because I need to do it to keep up with progression. So what really killed Lost Ark for me was that after doing all of these chores, you had a chance to progress due to the very gambly-like system that they had for upgrades. I know that MMOs are all based around RNG in one form or another, but it just felt bad in the way it was presented to, spend hours on dailies and weeklies and then clicking a button and then it failing. I know that the chance to upgrade increased with each fail, but just the way it was presented, it made you feel like you just wasted all that time. I think it's pretty common in these Korean-style MMOs, so I don't know, maybe it's just not for me.
Is that it's nowhere near competing with the top dogs of the MMO world. So between...
Yeah, true. Also keep in mind that probably half of its active player base right now are populated by bots, from what I've seen.
Riot's situation and New World's fumble, it got me thinking, why is this so hard? What is going on? Making an MMO has to be the most irresponsible, stupidest idea you could ever go through with. In the last 10 years, there have been 20 MMOs notable enough to make the Wikipedia page, and 12 of those are still up and running. Obviously, there's been more than 20 MMOs released, but I'm just not counting the ones that Josh Strife Hayes finds buried in the deepest depths of the deep web that peaked at 23 concurrent players. They don't really count right now. It's definitely a dark age. Now, I would say when World of Warcraft went live in 2004, that is when the true golden age started. Some may say that when Ultima Online came out, it kind of changed the game. I don't really think an MMO golden age existed without WoW. It doesn't feel right to me. WoW did for MMOs what Fortnite did to Battle Royales. Because you may have noticed once Fortnite saw success in its little side game mode of Battle Royale that wasn't even what they wanted their players to try, caused about 55 to 100 others to emerge. Once WoW showcased that you can build a long-term player base with as much success as it had, with as much money as it generated, not only with its initial launch in 2004, but with its expansions in 2007 and on, I mean, how do you not convince investors to let you try and build another WoW? So once this golden age...
Yeah, I mean, they redefined the genre. They were incredibly niche before WoW, and after it found the formula, every MMO, it seemed, tried to recapture it, even completely changing existing MMOs such as Star Wars Galaxies, which changed from a complete sandbox to a complete theme park, an absolute 180-degree overhaul, and it didn't seem to matter. Warhammer Online, Age of Conan, Old Republic, ESO, or any of the hundreds which peaked at that 20 peak player count, they ultimately failed at decrowning WoW. Putting their own shortcomings aside, I've come to realize, and I mentioned this in my recent top 10 video, the reason why they failed is that, in my opinion, WoW was a product of its time. When WoW was released, it was unique, not only because it was the one that found the formula, but also because it released during the dawn of social media, where it was new and exciting to interact with people from across the world and make friends and build communities. World of Warcraft and all of these other MMOs are social media, and I think that really played such a huge part in it becoming such a hit. Aside from its innovations, which were great, don't get me wrong, it really was just a product of its time. 100%.
Started, much like the Battle Royale boom, we also got a few really good games to emerge alongside WoW. They're still here, people playing them. We also got an overwhelming amount of stinkers, some real stinkers that are not around anymore. MMOs were peaking in the mid-2000s. It was the thing to do. It was the style of game that players wanted to play. Even the projects that saw short-term success but didn't really survive, some still to this day have community-backed projects, private servers, to keep the community alive. All these MMO games meant a lot to people. They proved to be this genre of game that you truly did become a part of. And even though the MMO scene was kind of slowing down in the late 2000s, early 2010s, games like Guild Wars 2 and Star Wars The Old Republic made their entry into the MMO scene and kind of picked up the stragglers that maybe weren't really happy with their games anymore or didn't really scratch the itch they wanted, and were still able to give a lot of players their home base of a game. 2013 unknowingly became the grand finale of MMOs. It was the year of revival, because in February we got old school RuneScape, and in August we got Final Fantasy XIV, both of them existing for the sake of redemption. RuneScape's main game was at an all-time low. Final Fantasy's first MMO, like 3 or 4 years earlier, was a huge flop, so both these companies basically tried again. And now 11 years later, it's safe to say that both of them did something right. confirmed. Since then, there's been a few notable MMOs that have come out, and they did okay. Elder Scrolls Online, Albion Online, Black Desert Online. These games are online, in case you were wondering. Lost Ark, New World, but...
My only experience with Black Desert Online was that I was on Discord with a friend who was upgrading some piece of gear, and I heard him smash his keyboard live on Discord because it broke or something. It was entertaining, to be sure, but yeah, it didn't make me want to play the game, I guess. But I will say that there's nothing more glorious than the sound of loose keys pattering on the floor while somebody is screaming obscenities. Oh, too good.
None of them really made the impact they were probably hoping for. It's almost as if all players interested in MMOs have kind of found their place and stayed there. It really is kind of like finding your home base, and that's just where you retreat back to at the end of the day. We're all kind of safe and cozy in our MMOs right now, kind of making the most of it. But even though the kings are up there on that hill, it doesn't mean they're resting up there comfortably. The wrong mistake could send them tumbling down at any moment. Those profitable, successful games up there, they got up there with blood, sweat, and dev tears. A lot of mostly dev tears. We now have insight to another reason of why creating an MMO is a really dumb idea. Money. Microtransactions have played a significant role in keeping these games alive. They've got to pay a staff to maintain and update and create for the game so that they keep their players there. They've got to pay for these massive servers. I don't even know how much those things cost. And also making sure that they meet the quota so that the very top executive owner of the company gets the salary that they've written for themselves.
Question, is Jagex milking their players?
Well, yeah, it's quite a big question.
And whatever they need to do to get there is what they gotta do. Subscriptions by themselves cannot sustain an MMO. It could pay for WoW in 2007 when everybody was paying a $15 a month subscription on top of buying a $40 expansion every other year, but even that caught up. They have a shit ton of microtransactions, and obviously that's more of a problem for the MMOs that make it big and they have all of these expenses, but any game that sees this big success is going to eventually run into this problem of how do we afford to keep this going. Back at my home base,
I know that this is a very contested subject, and I think there's truth to it for sure in the amount of employees that these developers now have, but I look at this whole train of thought in a different way, and let me explain why. The first is that I think people are just way too generous with what they let these studios get away with. More money earned doesn't really mean the employees get paid more. In fact, I think it means the opposite. It seems to me that the more money these AAA video game developers earn, the worse they treat their employees, such as Blizzard, after a record-breaking financial quarter, slashing the bonuses of their employees by 58%, or even just straight up firing them and, giving them gift cards to the games they just got fired from working on their way out, as if they're trying to insult them. And I think it's just the curse of AAA. I see what Jimmy is saying here, and I agree with him to an extent, but I also think that people take this way too far, and they see it as like it's necessary to sell all forms of character progression in order to make it within the world of MMOs. These microtransactions exist simply because people are willing to pay for them. The MMORPG is very addictive. It's entirely focused on character progression, whether that be levels, gold. The mobile game monetization scheme has really taken such deep roots, and they affect not just the genre in negative ways, but also the players on an individual level. So much so that some countries are actually going to such lengths as to ban these monetization schemes, such as loot boxes. You ever wonder why Overwatch 1 shut down and was replaced with Overwatch 2, which has the same maps, the same characters, and the same items transferring over? What? You think it was for the now canceled PvE game mode that they promised, but abandoned because it was too hard? No. Your answer lies in the monetization model, which went from the increasingly scrutinized and banned loot boxes to the clean, but also FOMO-abusing battle passes. Or maybe we can talk about the same poor, downtrodden employees who patented a matchmaking algorithm in Overwatch where it determined what your main character was and tried to put you into a match, not based off of any skill level, but instead against somebody who also played that same character, but was using a skin you didn't have in order to covertly manipulate you into buying more loot boxes. The primary reason why these games are monetized in this way is greed. I absolutely see what Jimmy's saying here, and I see the side of the argument, but it's also important to remember the predation that exists within the games industry, and that if you allow these developers to take advantage of you, they will, because it's lucrative to do so. I'm not saying that anybody who buys microtransactions are addicted and they're taken advantage of. I think that's pretty bad hyperbole, but what I'm saying here is that people's addictions are being preyed upon in the industry in both covert and overt ways, and it's important to stand your ground and keep your guard up because people will take advantage of you if you allow them to. It's gross, to say the least.
I give Jagex a lot of money every year through subscriptions. I pay for my subscriptions on multiple accounts, as do other people, and Jagex makes millions off of players giving them monthly subscription money. But you may have noticed while we're over here frolicking in our flowers of polls and community involvement and fun, our brothers and sisters over at RuneScape 3 cannot say the same.
Is Jagex actually this oblivious? We're in a time where RuneScape, at least according to the majority of the vocal player base, feels like it's being neglected, and as someone who's been covering the news and following the game actively for years now, I also think it's being neglected. How does a company with hundreds of employees and, according to the most recently released financial statements, £137 million in revenue, have the audacity to recolor a 3-year-old outfit and sell it as part of some kind of limited edition pack?
RuneScape 3 has been contaminated with regularly updated, toxic cash-grabbing microtransactions. It's experiencing increments of worse. Players just begging the devs to please stop, as if the devs have any control over it. RuneScape 3.
So the way that I see it is that I feel like people don't really consider how many people are turned off by these microtransactions, which in turn feeds this supposed reliance on microtransactions. When the path to the giant pile of money is microtransactions instead of good game design, you get innovative ways to get money out of you instead of good game design. This is especially true in monopolistic industries such as the MMO, where there's less of a need for innovation because there's not a lot of competition. A large reason why this is happening in RuneScape, apparently, in my opinion, and many other MMOs out there, is because of the cash shop. When these MMOs relied on box sales and sub fees, the most lucrative way to develop your game was to keep your player hooked with good game design. In my opinion here, and let me know if you see where I'm getting at, these cash shops aren't keeping MMOs alive because they're steering away the path to the giant pile of money. They lose their innovation, they lose their quality, they become stagnant, and people quit as a result of that, making them more reliant on, guess what? Cash shops. Because the games are no longer as good, there aren't as many people subscribed, so then they have to lean on microtransactions more because of microtransactions in a large way. And we've had plenty of instances of data supporting this, such as MAUs declining as profitability grows. It's a never-ending cycle, and these microtransactions slowly but surely become more and more macro over time until you get to the point to where you're selling the entire point of playing the game to begin with by way of selling all forms of character progression, again in a genre of game centered around character progression, whether that be selling levels, gold, gear, whatever, because again, that's now the primary ways of generating revenue. It's no longer what used to be this great and innovative design. But honestly, if you want to ask a real question, that's how did we get here? And this may sound weird, but I really think it has a lot to do with the simple fact that WoW became so successful and the industry became so monopolistic that it stagnated. There's no need for innovation when you're the only shark in the pond. Who cares about innovation? You already have everyone, so there's less potential here to make money compared to, say, microtransactions, which started low, just a pet here and there, and then character services, transmog, mounts, levels, gold, and now gear. That's why I said that the genre is in a tough spot, because they're primarily AAA, which obviously and understandably is motivated by money. They're publicly traded companies. Indie game devs, you can get away with maybe not being completely motivated for financial reasons, and there is some room for innovation there because of that. But because, again, they're primarily AAA, due to how monopolistic they are, you don't get innovation because innovation isn't required to generate revenue. Innovation is tough. You need experienced and very skilled developers who know the genre like the back of their penis or vagina, and you need them to create magic, essentially. The MMO genre is so difficult because it's entirely variable on its player base. You can design something to be played one way, and the player base may play it a completely different way. Innovation can't simply be willed into existence, so, why chase after it? Why chase after it when you can have an artist make a store mount over a weekend that'll generate millions of dollars instead? Or sell gold, levels, gear. Call it brainless, call it lazy, call it bad. Just make sure that you also include lucrative in your description. And in my opinion, that's where WoW is today because of how popular it got. And it's where the industry is today because of how monopolistic it is. And it's tough, but the player base has to collectively steer the path of the giant pile of money away from microtransactions and back towards innovation, because they're the only ones who can. They're the only ones who can motivate that. And I don't know if that'll happen because developers obviously are developing the game to keeping you in this microtransaction loop by resetting character progression and constantly selling character progression over and over and over and over again. So that's why I don't really care for the argument of, all right, well, you need microtransactions to pay everybody because, it's already tough enough without defending just simple predation within the industry that we don't need, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, excuses that aren't even necessarily true, as shown when these developers cut their bonuses or fire employees after record-breaking quarters. That's just my opinion. Like I said, very contentious subject, but that's what I'm thinking. Steve Jobs actually has a really relevant quote for this, though, that'll play for you here. And as you're watching this, see if you can correlate this to maybe a video game that you've played in the past.
What happens is, like with John Scully, John came from PepsiCo, and they at most would change their product, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So if you were a product person, you couldn't change the course of that company very much. So who influenced the success of PepsiCo? The sales and marketing people. Therefore, they were the ones that got promoted, and therefore they were the ones that ran the company. Well, for PepsiCo, that might have been okay, but it turns out the same thing can happen in technology companies that get monopolies, like, IBM and Xerox. If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better copy or a better computer. So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people, and they end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products. Sort of the product sensibility and the product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. They have no conception of the craftsmanship that's required to take a good idea and turn it into a good product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers. So that's what happened at Xerox. The people at Xerox PARC used to call the people that ran Xerox toner heads. And these toner heads would come out to Xerox PARC and they just had no clue about what they were seeing.
And for our audience, toner is what?
Oh, toner. Toner is what you put into a copier. Yeah, the toner that you add to an industrial copier.
The black stuff.
The black stuff, yeah. So basically they were copier heads that just had no clue about a computer or what it could do. And so they just grabbed defeat from the greatest victory in the computer industry. Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry today. Could have been, a company 10 times its size. Could have been IBM. Could have been the IBM of the 90s. Could have been the Microsoft of the 90s. So, but anyway, that's all ancient history. It doesn't really matter anymore.
Sure.
The power in these companies is transferred and controlled by the people who make the money. So if the people who make the money are no longer developers, i.e. people who have dedicated their entire lives to game design, and it's instead the people who've dedicated their lives to finding the most effective way to monetizing people's addictions in a genre of game defined by its addictive nature, who's really in power here? I mean, he said it himself.
As if the devs have any control over it.
Yeah, true. But this is a problem created by the cash shops because they are so lucrative, have taken power from the developers and handed it to the microtransaction people. And, I think their quality is representative of that.
Is the soldier spreading its arms, protecting us from projectiles while we sleep soundly, telling the devs that we're not fond of this idea they think they're having. But what I'm trying to say is that even old school RuneScape, as one of the most populated MMORPGs in modern gaming, only exists because RuneScape 3 offers microtransactions. Because what you've spent on old school RuneScape membership subscriptions in the last 6 years, 10 people spent that same amount yesterday on RuneScape 3 keys. Those are the players that Jagex needs, not you, not me. MMOs are
Yeah, exactly. And, what are the quality of these two games? RuneScape 3 versus OSRS. One motivated by microtransactions and one motivated by subscriptions. I'm actually asking here. From what he's saying, it seems like 3 is in a pretty tough spot right now compared to OSRS, but I've honestly have never played RuneScape, so maybe you guys can actually help me out with this one.
expensive to make and they're expensive to maintain. Which, by the way, whoever over at Amazon Games thought that a one-time purchase of a $40 game was going to be enough to sustain a huge MMO, what are you doing? What did you think was going to happen? And then who decided that microtransactions were going to be your next alternative, and this is what you have in the store? They practically begged to not make money.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's also the quality of the game too, or lack thereof, rather. Like, New World being terrible, for lack of a better term, I think has more to do with it failing than ugly cash shop items, you know? Sorry to any New World fans out there, and like I said, I enjoyed it for when I played it, but yeah. But this game had huge problems. I've seen the videos. It's had monumental problems.
What's fucking cracking, baby?
The biggest problem that new MMOs are going to face are getting a true player base. Not the players that are there on day one seeing how long they can wait in a queue. Not even the ones that invest 200 hours and experience a little bit of endgame. I'm talking about the true player base. The player base that if your game shuts down, they will be on the front lines doing whatever they can to create their own version of your game, some sort of backup code to keep the community alive. Those are the players that you're looking for. They're there because they love the game. They're there for real. And those are going to be extremely difficult to get because chances are they already have that game. They're already a part of that community. And most of them aren't going to be feeling that way about multiple MMOs. At this point...
Yeah, he makes a great point. First, just being the time investment, it's very hard to impress someone enough to drag them away from their favorite MMO. And it also has to do with sunk fallacy costs. With how much time and money these MMOs consume, there are people who have spent thousands of days and dollars over the course of decades, in some cases, into just one game. I think that the experience is what you make of it, and I never look at my time in WoW as wasted when I wasn't playing it. I more look at it like, I had fun, that's worth it, and nothing can take that away from me. But not everyone looks at it like that, and for many, to abandon that game for another would, in a way, to them, is like, well, crap, what was that all for?
New MMOs have to pull their player base from other MMOs. You're going to be trying to pull players from WoW, and from Final Fantasy, and from RuneScape, and Guild Wars 2. The players that already know what they like and dislike about massive multiplayer online games. Which means that, by default, a new MMO is immediately competing with the top of that hill. Could you imagine trying to enter that space and these are the guys you're standing next to, trying to gain their players? Good luck. The best kind of player base to get for a brand new MMO is a new MMO player. Ones that haven't experienced the other ones yet, and you're going to be their first experience, which would mean...
Absolutely true, and again, one of the reasons why World of Warcraft was so successful was because it was entering a genre with this huge, untapped casual player audience that didn't want to lose XP on death, or whatever unforgiving features that nearly every other MMO had. World of Warcraft, for a lot of people, wasn't even their first MMO. It was their first game, period. I know, I mean, I seemed to raid with a lot of them.
Trying to appeal to the iPad babies, the TikTok brains, the fucking Fortnite Warzoners. You know, the ones that can't even hold their attention to short form content unless there is a video below the main content that has some car surfing on ramps so that their weird brains allow them to stay there. Dude, drop a
He's not joking, it's actually true. It is a really good point. MMOs, because they are such a large time investment, they actually require some sort of an attention span. And I don't know if you guys know this, but primarily due to social media, the average attention span of a person has significantly dwindled within the past couple of decades. You know, the TikTokers who swipe through 10 videos in the span of 10 seconds.
15-year-old into vanilla WoW Northshire and see how long it takes for their brains to start freaking out because there's not enough colors and numbers. The generation following us is not gonna really be interested in this slower paced MMO style that we fell in love with. Why would they run around Elwyn Forest or go kill goblins in Lumbridge when in that same time frame they could have had 3 adrenaline-pumping Warzone games to feel dopamine from? They don't chase the same numbers going up that we do. It makes me wonder if the generation following us, when they get to be our age, if they're going to be more interested in goal-oriented things like long-term MMO goals. I don't see new generations coming into MMOs, and I don't see current MMO players jumping to a new one when they've already established their community and love for one that they've been a part of for years.
I do actually have data to back this up. So I'm primarily a vanilla channel, you would say, and on YouTube, because they're creepy, they have access to your guys' demographics. They watch you while you poop, and as you can see, the people who are interested in vanilla, at least on my channel, are primarily 25 to 44 years old. I mean, it's not proof or anything, but it is indicative of the player base of vanilla, I would say. It's also a total sausage fest in here, by the way. In case you're curious, World of Warcraft isn't the most attractive thing in the world, apparently, if you haven't gathered that. But yeah, great point here.
I think the current games that we have in the MMO space are going to remain there, at least for as long as both the players and the devs have that desire. In order for an MMO to take the reins, become the next big thing, to really be the game changer, it's going to have to be very outside the box. Never done before, a big risk. Chances are the next MMO to really overtake these or even see equal success as these hasn't even been thought of yet. But I just have this strange feeling that the next MMO that comes out that has 6 classes to choose from, a woodcutting skill, and 2004-ass fetch quests is not going to be the one to see themselves at the top of that hill with those. It's just a hunch. I don't know. This Ashes of Creation game I've seen talked about for like the last 3 years is supposedly going to be the MMO that changes everything. They had this dev blog come out at...
Ashes. A lot of people have asked me about this, and my answer is that, and you know, no offense to people who are excited, and I hope it's good, but I really haven't been too impressed. You know, he just said that if we're gonna see a new WoW, it'll have to be innovative, but I just don't see that in Ashes, personally. I think it looks like a pretty run-of-the-mill MMO to me, and I think it'll I think it'll have a niche player base, but I don't think it's going to take off in a huge way. But who knows, I could be wrong. Hopefully I am. I hope that there's more great MMOs out there.
The end of March, and I was like, okay, this looks cool. And on the side of the screen, I see some quests about killing 20 goblins. And I'm like, no fucking way that this is the revolutionary thing. The next big MMO is not gonna have kill 20 goblins as a fucking quest, I promise. They've already lost in my eyes. There's just no way another one of those is gonna be the one to be up there. No. There's a few things that I believe the next big MMO needs to do differently. I think the number one priority is to come up with a structure that eliminates the locust swarm effect. Finish this as fast as possible. Get to max level as fast as possible. Get to the end game, the best in slot, the min-maxing as fast as possible. It's a real shitty habit that we've developed with video games, especially MMOs recently. I think it's played.
The biggest group of subscription losses, aside from the people who play for 10 minutes and quit, are those who hit the max level. Leveling is where you hook the players because it's simple and goal-oriented. When you're level 1, your goal is level 2. When you're level 2, your goal is level 3. And you're handed quests to help with that. And you get this great feeling of progression. You slowly but surely learn new skills. The content is drip-fed to you. You get these talent points of some sort, better gear to equip. You're unlocking more zones, more dungeons. And it's only when people reach the max level and they lose this direction and all of these endgame systems are thrown at them is when they throw their hands up in the air and they're just, all right, this is too much trouble for what it's worth. Some people raid, others PvP, some people collect stuff. Everybody levels. Leveling is where you have the biggest opportunity to hook the player. And it's such a shame that these MMOs seem to even sacrifice leveling, and they put as little effort into it as possible in order to put more into the end game. He mentioned New World's 2004 quest fetch system. Now, New World neglected everything as far as I'm concerned, but its questing was inexcusably low effort. Like, literally, 90%. Kill 10 of these, collect 8 of these, kill this named, and the amount of reused enemies rivaled even old NES games released in the 80s. But it's not just New World. It's all over the genre, and I agree, I really do think it's a giant blind spot. Now, if I were to make an MMO, honestly, I would make a leveling system adapted to the pace of the modern gamer, where even still, it takes months and months to reach the max. Let's say for an average player in the modern era, 6 months. And while there would be an endgame, of course, the majority of the efforts would be on making the best leveling experience you've ever had in any MMO. This huge immersive world, tons of zones, great quests, amazing group content, lots of dungeons, just total pure immersion, because this is what every player does. You make them fall in love with the journey, and then you earn the right to do the end game.
Such a big role in the overall downfall of MMOs, why everything feels underwhelming now. Unfortunately, I think as long as a game structure exists that allows for that kind of mentality, it's not going to find the success that it would have found back when we weren't playing games like that, in the golden age of MMOs, when things were actually enjoyed. That's why we want to play games solo now. It's why you can get from level 1 to 70 playing by yourself in WoW. And that's not going to make for a successful MMO. You might as well just make a single player game. Other MMOs would...
I know that I can input my credit card solo to level from 1 to 70. That's the best way to play video games, in my opinion. I'm such a fan of MMOs that I'll not only just pay $15 a month to play them, I'll pay hundreds more to not play them because, I love them so much.
Benefit a lot by trying a more RuneScape-style quest system, where it feels almost like a mission with a lot of benefits afterwards, rather than just the same generic copy-pasted coding of a quest of going and getting 10 mushrooms on a tree and bringing it back for XP. It's the reason why a game like RuneScape, which people have always poked fun at its graphics, feels more alive than a game with fucking Unreal Engine 5. It's the way it feels when you're a part of that world. And I think a lot of MMOs kind of look the other way when it comes to structuring things like that. They're too scared to try something else for progression. I don't know, they just play it too safe. The world has to feel alive, and everyone's end goal can't be the same. I'm not a game dev, I'm just a consumer. I complain. My role here is to complain. I'm not the guy.
Same.
If I knew what this next MMO looked like, I would be trying to make it. I promise you I would. I don't think,
I just said if I were to develop an MMO, but honestly, even if I were given the chance, I don't think I would. Not because I think I would fail, but, well, I mean, I just love what I do now, but also, in my opinion, being a developer sounds horrible because, you know, in today's market, which is primarily dominated by money, and therefore the obsessed, greedy AAA, you're caught in this awful position between the ire of the player base and the indifference of your publisher. This is what actually happened to the Star Wars Galaxies developers, and I'm sure many others out there. There are developers out there who have like these public Twitter profiles. I don't see how they do it, to willingly let themselves just get absolutely bombarded by really angry people misdirecting their ire onto them because they've made themselves reachable and just basically using them as a human piñata. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they engage daily with these people. I think that game development is actually quite known for being a soul-crushing profession. I do have a background in computer science, and when I was studying for it, I was actually specifically warned by my teachers that if you want to hate coding, get into game development because it's a quick way to crush your soul. So this is where I disagree here. Respect to Jimmy here, but I don't think I would do it personally. I mean, I love the genre, of course, but I love being sane and my quality of life more. So, yeah.
Any current game devs have really wrapped their head around what it takes to bring an MMO to the next level, but I think with a lot of emerging game engines and technology we're capable of now, we're eventually going to see that thing that really makes our eyes widen and our mouths salivate. It's gonna happen. Could be a year from now, 10 years from now. Our generation of MMO players, probably the only generation of MMO players, are going to be looking for that game, and we'll know it when we see it. But for now, I think we're just gonna be cozy in the games that we play. For a more optimistic look, I think if RuneScape has taught me anything, other MMOs have really not experimented with shit. They have not really opened up the sandbox of themselves. The fact that World of Warcraft just recently released a hardcore version after it took someone developing an entire plugin to do it just kind of shows how they haven't really tried shit yet. And the fact that they just tried a battle royale is even funnier. They're trying, you know, we'll give it to them. Blizzard's trying. They might be 10 years too late to the battle royale boom we mentioned earlier, but they're trying, and we've got...
I haven't played Dragonflight, but to say something positive about retail for a change, I do hear that Plunderstorm was actually pretty well received. I'm not sure, maybe you guys can enlighten me on it because I haven't played it in so long. I'm not super in tune with the current community for sure, but I've only heard good things personally.
To give them that credit. Blizzard has done everything in their power to self-destruct, and they're still standing. It's incredible. If they're not going down by now, they're never going down, all right? That company's here to stay, which gives me confidence that other MMOs will be here to stay too. So we don't really have anything to worry about when it comes to our favorite games, our cozy home base being gone. And I think a lot of MMOs need to take advantage of this world that they've created and the different capabilities their engines have, and look and see how they can approach things differently, like RuneScape has with hardcore modes, Iron Man modes, and region locks with leagues, restricted game modes, challenges, people like watching challenges. And I think a lot of the big MMOs nowadays have the ability to implement something like that to keep their current active player bases occupied and entertained for a long time. And all that.
I think he nailed it earlier. I think if there is a formula to be found, it's in sandbox. Before World of Warcraft, the genre consisted primarily of the sandbox style of game, like Star Wars Galaxies, Worm, Albion, Ultima, to name just a few. And like I said, when WoW released, it shifted the entire genre to theme park. And that's for a reason. But what I'm saying here is that comparatively, because of this, the sandbox style has much more unexplored territory. There is significant interest in player-made content, especially with how social media has evolved, and this is shown quite well, such as the Makagara tournament in Hardcore WoW that was run by OTK, which drew in hundreds of thousands of viewers. I know that Hardcore isn't super populated right now, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but the interest is there, is the point I'm trying to make. You know, even being a theme park game, it was all run by the community and player-made content, which is the Sandbox's MO. So if you ask me if this mythic formula does exist, I think it'll be Sandbox.
That being said, I truly hope I look like an idiot a week from today when that next big thing is announced. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I think there's a future for MMOs, and we'll all be here for it. Anyway, I think that's all I got. I've been putting together the house video. It's just 5 days of a lot of footage. It's a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. I also have a special project I can't really talk about right now, but I'm working on that beginning of May. Other than that, it's been a pleasure. Great seeing you. Take it easy.
I'm not sure, personally. I mean, it'll be 20 years in November this year since the MMO that changed it all, and while some have gotten close in subscriptions, in my opinion, the market is still very monopolistic. I'm not sure. Do you guys think that there'll be another WoW caliber MMO? Or do you think it was really just a product of its time? Not to be pessimistic, but I personally would be surprised because, again, I think one of the reasons why WoW became so popular was because it really was a product of its time. Along with MySpace, it was one of the first widely used forms of social media when it was an exciting prospect to interact with people online and argue with them about politics. Like Jimmy said here, he made a great point. I also think that because it was so many people's first MMO, it didn't have that challenge he mentioned of trying to drag people away who have decades of affection and memories and time, and the sunk cost fallacy to leave behind. And, you know, also the 2-second attention span of all of the TikTok Zoomers also limits the pool even more. Whatever it may be, I think it certainly has a lot to overcome. We can probably all agree with that, but let me know what you think. My favorite thing about these reacts is that they spark a lot of discussion in the comments, and I like seeing what you guys think, so yeah, let me know. This is a good video. I'm actually going to subscribe, and I suggest you do the same if you enjoyed it. This was my first time watching Jimmy, so yeah, I'll keep an eye on his future uploads. He seems to be like a really quality content creator here, so I definitely recommend him. Go check out his channel and subscribe to him, you guys. Aside from that, like the video if you liked it, because I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.